Way Back Wednesdays. What I'm going to talk about today, guys, is something that was spurred by a conversation that someone was having with me with regards to their son who trains martial arts with me. I'm trying to learn Portuguese, partly because it's part of the culture of the martial art I train, but also because I invested a very long time trying to learn it for a girl I was dating. We broke up, but I mean, it would be a shame to throw away this knowledge. And so my Portuguese professor, her son is a student of mine, just through happenstance. And, I was asking about him, how's he doing? And he's in college, and she's like, he's not taking college that seriously, and all he wants to do is martial arts. And she's like, and then right when we're saying that, he calls her on the phone, and she's like, here, tell him in Portuguese, tell him what I told you, that he's got to focus on college. And I was like, okay. And so I jokingly told him that, listen, jiu-jitsu is life. Train jiu-jitsu as much as possible. It's much more important than college. She yells at me, takes the phone. She's laughing, but she goes, no, you really have to say this. He listens to you. And when I told her, I said, and people say this to me all the time, talk someone out of pursuing the very decisions you made. That's what they're saying. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my process to becoming a full-time martial artist and making martial arts my job. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the reactions and kind of the conversations that I got back then and that I get now. So, I started doing jiu-jitsu when I was 15 years old. And I wasn't particularly adept at it at first, but I really was fascinated with it. Martial arts was always something that captured my attention, and I just didn't necessarily think they worked, or if they did work, I didn't have access to martial arts that worked in my area. And once I found Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I was like, man, this is amazing. And I knew I wanted to learn more, and boxing and Muay Thai and wrestling and judo and all of that. And I knew I would do it for the rest of my life. I knew that after my first class. I was like, this is something I'm going to do for the rest of my life, but I didn't think it would be my job for a variety of reasons. Not that I didn't think it would be cool. I was raised in a family where academics was very enforced. And academically, I excelled. I was in all honors classes. I moved on to AP classes. I was decently well-spoken. I was literate. I was expected to be a high achiever. I had, there were 4 of us, so I had 3 siblings. And everyone in my family got at least a master's degree. My father had a master's degree, my mother did, my sister, my youngest brother just finished his MBA, my other brother is a PhD chemist. Everyone was very intelligent. My uncle was an attorney. My other uncle has a master's degree as well. That's just, our family prided itself on high academic achievement and kind of making a lot of money in the corporate 9-to-5 world. And that was what I was expected to pursue. And I went to college to pursue that. And then at a certain point, something happened that I never thought would happen. I got good at martial arts. I loved it, but I always kind of sucked. And maybe I would take second place in a local tournament or something. But I had a mental block, and I kind of broke through that, and I got a little bit of my man strength. And I started doing really well. And I started winning tournaments and competitions, and I started cross-training in boxing and Muay Thai and wrestling. And I started to think, man, maybe I could actually have an MMA fight. And I did, and I won. And then I was training for my second MMA fight, and it was hard. Because at this point I was teaching martial arts kind of part-time. I was training kind of full-time, but I was also going to school. It was a double major in psychology and economics. My plan was to get a bachelor's degree in that, then go to law school. I was a bit argumentative, so people thought that I could turn that into a profession, kind of trying to prove my point to everybody. And it was hard. This was a very, very hard time in my life. And I was like, man, the guy that I was fighting, all he was doing was training. He wasn't going to school. He wasn't teaching. He was training to kick my ass. And I won the fight, but it was a hard fight. And I was like, man, if I want to really make a go of this, going to school is going to be hard. And then I can remember I had a lot of opportunities fall into my lap at the same time. I was going to have a high-profile grappling super fight with Ryan Hall. And then I also, immediately after that, was going to enter a mixed martial arts tournament with a $15,000 prize at the end of it. That doesn't sound like much, but in 2007, especially where I was and where the sport was, $15,000 was a lot of money. And I was like, all right, the only way that I'm going to be able to swing this is if I stop going to school. I was doing extremely well. I was Dean's List every semester. And I can remember, I didn't drop out. I took what is called a leave of absence. And I didn't want my parents to know because I knew they would be upset. And now this is before Obamacare, where you could just stay on your parents' insurance for the rest of your life. At this point, if I could stay on my parents' insurance, I was 22 at the time, or 21. Yes, I was going to turn 21, so actually I think it was still 20. And if you maintained full-time status, you could stay on your parents' insurance. Once I took the leave of absence, I forgot about that. And my father comes home one day, and he says to me, he goes, "Hey, Brian, can you just get a letter from the university saying that you're a full-time student?" I'm like, "Yeah, I can do that. Well, why do you need it?" And he goes, "You know, my insurance company said they dropped you. Something about you not being a full-time student anymore." I'm like, "Well, now's as good a time as any to have this discussion." I was like, yeah, I'm just taking time off." He goes, "You're what?" I'm like, I'm taking a leave of absence. My dad did not take kindly to the sabbatical. He was like, "What? You're dropping out?" Lost his mind, as he often did, and is screaming at me, telling me how I'm making the worst decision of my life and how I'm going to march right back in there and sign back up. And I wasn't even living at home at the time. I had my own place, was paying my own bills, and I'm like, "No." And he goes, "What are you going to be doing?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm teaching jiu-jitsu, and I'm fighting. I'm going to win these $15,000. I'm going to beat Ryan Hall." I think he Googled Ryan Hall, and he's like, "You're fighting a marathon runner?" Little known fact, Ryan Hall is actually same name, but different person. A very accomplished, long distance runner. I was like, "No, I'm fighting this guy. He blinks a lot, but he's very good at jiu-jitsu, and it's a big deal." But my father didn't think so. And so he sat there, and he tried to convince me, and he didn't make a very strong argument, though. He couldn't have been a lawyer. And if he was, the verdict wasn't going in his favor. And I just sat there, was like, "No, I'm not budging on this. This is what I'm doing." And I've always been a bit of a strong-willed person. And so once he realizes it, I'll never forget what he did. He put his hands in his head in his hands and goes, "Just go back to school once you're done with this choking lessons and this martial arts stuff. Just promise me you'll go back to school, okay?" And he would trail off under his breath, saying, every miserable thing about me. So my parents were in my corner. And everyone thought that it was the dumbest thing. Every family member would hear that I dropped out and I was just this moron. Well, not having to go to school allowed my school to grow a little bit. The academy I was trying to run. And I was able to recover from my workouts. I was able to get more training in, and I had some success. I won the super fight with Ryan. I rattled off the 3 submission victories. I won the MMA tournament. And I sat there. I can remember my whole family went to the finals of the tournament. And I won very easily. Didn't get hit. Scored a triangle choke. And it's funny because they thought that what I was doing was very rinky-dink. And I'm not trying to act like I was winning the Olympics, but the event was on pay-per-view. So I was, on television. It was a natural broadcast. I was getting interviewed. And it was at the Tropicana Casino. And it was a sold-out crowd. And I sold probably 100-something tickets. Everyone was screaming my name. And they gave me a big vanity check. And I can remember, I dreamt of this moment. Because my father, back in the day before cell phones, people used to call my house and ask for me. And if I was at jiu-jitsu, my father would never say that I was at jiu-jitsu. He would snidely say, "Oh yeah, Brian's at choking lessons and giggle to himself because that's what he thought of what I did. It's like, oh, he takes these choking lessons. And so I was like, yeah, I'm going to win this tournament. I'm going to have my belt. I'm going to have my check. And I'm going to go to him and I'm going to say this line. I'm going to drop this line. And then I'm at the fight, surrounded by everyone. And I walk by real casually. I go, guess those choking lessons paid off, huh? And I walk by. And to me, that was like my, gotcha. And he forgot he even said, he's like, huh, what are you talking about? I was like, oh. I was so deflated. I was going to throw this in his face. But a funny thing started happening. When I won this match, and it was later shown on, it was shown on pay-per-view and everyone DVR'd it. And then I got in the local paper, which, I love the Poughkeepsie Journal. They do a lot for my school and stuff, but not a earth-shattering accomplishment. But it was on the front page. And my family bought a bunch of copies and started showing it to their friends. I became water cooler talk. And as a result of winning this MMA tournament, I got invited to try out for the Ultimate Fighter. I tried out, it went well, and then my family found out I was gonna be on reality television. And then in my little town, that got a lot of press. I was on the freaking cover of the paper every day for a week. And it became my dad was bragging to me. Or bragging about me to everyone, oh, my boy's gonna be on Spike TV. And my sister, who said I was an idiot, I found out she taught English. She bought copies of the paper and put it on every single student's desk. Kind of so she could ride my Z-list celebrity coattails, I guess. Because in Poughkeepsie, I was big stuff. But it's I got treated differently once I was on TV. It was oh, look, now you're important. And now it was oh, I supported him through every step of his journey. And I'm like, you guys are... I felt like Rashad Evans. You're so fake, John Jones. But it was my family. It's you guys all said I was a moron. Now I win a little bit of money. I'm on TV, and now I'm the smartest man in Babylon. And then for a time, my school started doing really well. And so then everyone's forgetting about having me go back to college. Now I've got this lucrative career. On the Ultimate Fighter, I break my nose. Get medically suspended. Thought I was going to get brought back for the finale. I don't get brought back for the finale. I take a fight with a tough guy. Lose a split decision. Did win Fight of the Year, but no one really cares if you won Northeast Fight of the Year from mixedmartialarts.com. But I lose the fight. Don't get re-signed to the UFC. I suffer a few more injuries. The Ultimate Fighter buzz dies down. My academy's not doing well. Not in the UFC. And now everyone's back harping on are you going back to school? Just, you tried your ultimate fighting, your ultimate frisbee, whatever you call it. It's not working. And I'm gone is all the buzz. And once again, I'm the failure. And so I went back to school. And I've never been less enthusiastic to do something. Going back to school was a defeat. My school was doing so bad, I had to move back home with the people that thought I was making such great decisions. And I'm just sitting there this is awful. And I can remember feeling terrible on my first day back to school. I remember I did have one more MMA fight. I was well, let me have one more fight. And I fought in a strip club parking lot. I've told the story before. I got kicked in the face and my eye is completely purple. My whole half of my face is wrecked. I look like Two-Face from the bad Batman movies in the late 90s. And I'm this is just awful. But then I saw a video for someone that was running basically a clinic on how to run a martial arts school. Because business-wise, I didn't know what I was doing. And so I went to this clinic. And I remember talking to this guy, and his story was very similar to mine. He was an MMA fighter. He had a certain level of success. He was trying to run a school, and he was an engineering student. And his story was that he walked out of his senior seminar, which was the last class he had to take. He walked out and just declared that I don't want to be an engineer anymore. I'm going to make this martial arts stuff work. He learned how to run a business, and the rest was history. And his school looked like a picture of my school. Everything in this testimonial or in the sales pitch I was giving was like my story. And I was like, okay, I'm all in. What do I have to do to make this happen? And he told me everything, and he said, you got to drop out of school. And I was like, oh boy. Round 2. And I only had one class I had to do. I had Italian 102, and then I would have my bachelor's degree. And I dropped out. And then my family is like, turns its back on me, like, okay, this kid's lost his mind. This is the second time he's done this. He's a complete moron. At the time, I was teaching in like a physical therapy center, which I've told this story before. We used to have bats fly in and the power cut out, and everyone called me an idiot. I implemented everything. I expanded into a storefront. I've expanded 3 times since then, and now I have a successful school. And now I've trained fighters, so I'll get to be on TV vicariously through them, and now everyone, it's like the Ultimate Fighter buzz gets brought back every time I go out to a different location. And now my family will tell stories like, Brian was just in Japan with one of his guys, and he's going to Morocco and Brazil and all of these wonderful places that martial arts has afforded me the opportunity to go. And to tell you the truth, I'm doing every bit as well financially as all of the other people in my family that stayed in school. I'm not some millionaire, but I'm definitely not on the unemployment line either. And now I'm looked at as this success story again. And once again, everyone wants to rewrite the history to say like they were always at my back. And so I believe that if you have a passion for martial arts, and if you dot your I's and cross your T's, you put the effort in to learn the sport, to learn the art, to really fully understand what it means to be a dedicated martial artist, and then you go with the extra mile and you learn how to run a business, you learn how to advertise, market, sell, you learn how to interact with all the various people you have to in regards to negotiations in business, people like landlords and lawyers and town officials, that you can be successful with this. And it's funny because now I have a successful academy, we have hundreds of students, but still, people will go to me and they will unintentionally insult the hell out of me. I can remember I had a gentleman working for me, and he was my manager. My plan for him was to have him open his own school. He was going to work for me, he was going to do well and learn how things run, and then when he was ready, once he climbed the ranks, he would have his own school, and I would help him and give him my blessing, and then he could go from there. And his parents wanted him to return to college, and they go to me. And they sit there and they tell me, you have to tell him to quit this, because he left school and he was doing well academically. It very much mirrored my story. You have to tell him to quit all this and go back to school. I said, well, with all due respect, man, that would be a little hypocritical coming from me, considering it's not the path that I took. And to be fair, she was comparing him to his sister who had graduated, and his sister was a school teacher, which is a fine profession. But I said, his sister still lives at home. His sister has certain struggles. I'm doing every bit as well or better than his sister, and I don't have this college degree. And she looks at me and she goes, this life of yours, she was foreign, but she says, this life of yours is good maybe for someone like you, someone that does not need good things. But for him, he needs more. And so you will tell him this, or I will haunt him and you. She threatened to haunt me, which is an interesting blackmail. Like, you tell him what I want to do in life, or I will spend eternity chasing you. I almost wanted to call her on it. Be like, you know what? Bring it. I don't believe in your haunting powers. But yeah, it's a familiar thing where people will even see my success and they'll tell me, kind of like my Portuguese professor, or professora, I should say. She wants me to tell her son that he can't pursue jiu-jitsu and go down the path of being a full-time martial artist when it's a completely achievable goal. And something people always say, the most insulting thing you can say to someone that is trying to do martial arts full-time, never say this. If you have someone that you care about in your life that is trying to become a martial artist full-time, and in this instance, I'm talking about teaching, because as a fighter, I do think you need this. all right? But a fighter can always teach. I'm talking about someone that wants to be an instructor and a school owner that is passionate about teaching and has the ability to. What's your backup plan? What that is doing is assuming a failure. And it's something that only people in martial arts and other professions where people say you can't make it are told they have to have. My brother wanted to be a chemist. At no point did someone say, well, what's your backup plan? What if you can't make it as a chemist? It's a very hard field. What if the market for your brand of chemistry goes down? What if any number of things happen? What if technological advances happen such that your job could be automated? All of those things could happen. No one went to my brother and said, what's your backup plan for being a chemist? My sister's an English teacher. No one said to her, and I know quite a few teachers that cannot find work in my area. No one said, what's your backup plan? My brother wanted to be an accountant. No one said, what's your backup plan? But me, I have to have a backup plan. I have to be like, I'm an MMA fighter, and I am also studying hospitality. I am also studying to be an electrician, because my goal, or the goal of someone in this field, is so ridiculous, so likely to fail, that we have to have a plan B. For us to confidently go in the direction of our dream is seen as ridiculous. And that really bothers me. I really thought it's insulting. But I've been talking for longer than I planned, so I'm going to just end on this. A few words of advice for people that do want to make martial arts their livelihood. Number one is, obviously, learn as much as you can about the art. Don't focus just on doing, focus on understanding. When there is a technique that you know, ask yourself, how would I teach this? Anticipate questions that you would have and try to come up with creative answers to them. Next thing is, develop your people skills. A great variety of people are going to come into martial arts. Some people that are professional, some people that are shy and reserved, some people that are children, some people that are older, some people that are jokers, and some people in between. You have to be able to relate and talk to all of them and make everyone feel comfortable and welcome with you. And then the final and most important thing is learn how to run a business. Understand marketing, search engine optimization, know how to create a budget, understand how to put together a business plan, learn how to deal with town regulations and know about accounting. Be willing to be that guy that's going to put a suit and tie on and study, crunching the numbers, going to seminars, investing in themselves and their own personal growth. Because triangle chokes and high kicks are not enough in the real world. But if you know how to market those triangle kicks, sorry, I got hit a few times today in combat jiu-jitsu. Those triangle chokes and high kicks, if you know how to market them, and if you know how to relate to the people learning them, and you know how to show the value in those techniques, then maybe you can have a successful martial arts school. Way back Wednesday.